Charger stars Joey Bosa and Derwin James have been missing for a while now, but the great news is that Jim Harbaugh says he expects them to be back for week 1, which is huge news for Jesse Minter and this defense.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen today. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, Derwin James and Joey Bosa had been missing from practice for a very long time, and Coach Harbaugh is not giving anybody really any information at all. But we did get this today from him saying that he expects both Joey and Derwin to be ready for week 1, which is huge news. You want all of your superstars ready to go for that first regular season game. And then we have a preseason game to get into this Saturday, the last preseason game against the Cowboys, the last opportunity for these guys to make the roster. On offense, looking at Simi Fehoko and Brenden. On defense, that last safety spot's very interesting between JT Woods and maybe Thomas Harper.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It feels like they're kind of trying out for 2 different positions, but maybe both playing for the same roster spot. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. David, we got some great news at Thursday's press conference from Jim Harbaugh. When trying to kind of squeeze out of him injury information, he did say, "That's what I've been told," when asked if, Derwin James and Joey Bosa would be ready for the start of the regular season, which is huge news. I mean, I think for both of these guys, each of them have had kind of injuries that have derailed Charger seasons in the past, or what could have been a lot of times with both of these guys. Derwin's been pretty healthy, but I think both of them are looking to have a huge bounce back year in 2024. And it's great news to know, hey, they are banged up, they're being extra cautious, but both are expected to be there against the Raiders.
They're so crucially important. If you want to envision what this defense is capable of, it is only able to reach its peak if Derwin James and Joey Bosa are both on the field for that defense. They are so incredibly impactful. Derwin James is your eraser. He is a guy that can go and play all over the football field, a guy that, just brings it on every snap, has that leadership ability on and off the football field. He is crucial for this defensive game plan. And Joey Bosa, when he is healthy and on the field, he is a destructive force. And when he left, the joint practices against the Rams, he was destroying the practice, according to the people who were there, like absolutely just wrecking it. And so that's what Joey Bosa is capable of doing. You want him on one side, you want Khalil Mack on the other side, and you definitely want Derwin James on the back end, because that's the best that this defense is capable of being.
I think when Joey Bosa is healthy and right, I mean, he's the best player on this defense to me, and that's a defense that has Khalil Mack and Derwin James on it, which is saying a lot. He feels like he's going to destroy worlds this year if he can stay out there, but that's the biggest if that has pretty much
always
sidetracked his entire career so far, right? That is the asterisk next to him right now as far as what his career is. So he wants to be out there more than anyone. I think you've seen that, especially with him taking the pay cut. He wants to be here in Los Angeles with this team, and I think, when you haven't seen him since the joint practice against the Rams, or when you haven't seen Derwin James, at least from me going back through the practice report since August 5th, that's a little concerning. So to know that, hey, those guys are going to be back. We know now that Jesse Minter will at least be given the best chance from the start of the season, right? Pretty much have his full bevy of defensive starters, right? Like, I don't think they're expecting to miss any defensive starters right now going into the regular season, knock on wood, of course. But, this is from Alex Katzen, which was a great, who is a great follow on Twitter. But he said, the Chargers are the only team in the NFL without a player on a season-ending injury list as of today. So a lot of guys missing practice, a lot of guys kind of intermittently in and out, but nobody's really gotten that big of an injury yet to where, they're going to be done for the year. So I think that's huge. I think that, it gives Jesse Minter the pieces that he needs to try to perform a Herculean task and try to turn a defense that was really bad under Brandon Staley around. But that wasn't all that Jim Harbaugh said, because he was asked about the starters and that, the past few press conferences for the preseason games. He had basically been saying like, okay, I'll tell you a couple guys on each side
guys that are obvious,
Yeah, and it was always guys we never expected to play, and half the time they were hurt guys anyways. Like, yeah, Justin Herbert and Derwin James and Joey Bosa aren't going to play today. But it was pretty funny when he said that 15 starters on offense and defense would not be playing in this game, considering there's only 11 players on each side. So what it tells me basically is, hey, the starters and guys that are going to have key reserve roles for us and that we have no kind of question whether or not they're going to make the team, they've proven enough to us, they're not going to play. But David, what it also kind of gives us is a little preview of how they feel about a huge chunk of this roster, right? 30 potentially of the 53 players that are going to make this team, and more if you count the specialists. And so if you're not in this game and it's not for injury purposes, you've made the team.
Yes, absolutely. That's good news for the people who, if they're not injured, obviously. The guys that are in street clothes that are going to be on the sidelines can feel very comfortable and confident that they've already put everything that they need to put on tape out there, and that they can rest and relax a little bit and get ready for the regular season. For all those other guys, it's showtime, right? This is your last opportunity to make a roster, whether that's for the Chargers on the 53 or the practice squad or auditioning for one of the other teams in the NFL. This is your last opportunity to go put your best foot forward.
Yeah, it is. And it is super important for a lot of players. So I think the big thing here is, hey, just because you're playing doesn't mean your roster spot isn't safe. But a lot of the guys that are playing are going to be playing, for a roster spot, for some sort of role with this team. And it is going to be crucially important. This is kind of where the Cinderella stories are made in games like this. This is where former undrafted free agents of, Chargers legends in the past have made their way. And, later on in the preseason, having big games, whether it's Antonio Gates or Austin Eckler or you name it. All these guys have gone through this. And that's why it's fun, even if, your favorite players aren't out there.
Right.
But the other kind of interesting thing to me, David, was that Jim Harbaugh basically made it seem like Easton Stick is going to be playing the whole game, which I did not see coming. Basically tells me that they've seen what they need to see from Luis Perez at this point, because he basically said Luis will come in if we have to fix Easton Stick's chin strap. Basically saying, unless we have to take Easton Stick out of the game, he's going to be playing this entire game. So they might be thinking it as a final audition. I've said before, it would not have been enough for me to just see him play super well in the third preseason game when pretty much every team is resting their starters. But it does feel like they're, maybe it is still an audition, though, because if he doesn't play well here, then it's waiver wire time, and your job is not safe going into, a flooded kind of part of the offseason.
Yeah, and honestly, it feels like there's a lot of other backup quarterbacks out there that might be a little bit better than Easton Stick, or at least what he has performed so far up to this point. But yeah, he made it pretty clear. He said, hey, we're going to treat this like a regular NFL regular season game where Easton Stick is the starter, and, barring, any type of injury, he's going to be going the entire game. The whole 60 minutes, it's going to be Easton Stick out there on offense for the Chargers. And Easton Stick is, needs to have a big performance in this one. He should be lighting it up out there with, who he is probably going to be going up against, which are more than likely guys that are not going to be making a 53-man roster in the NFL. So this is it. This is the absolute last chance for him, and he needs to take the bull by the horns and go out there and show he is a capable NFL backup quarterback.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, to me, I don't think it's possible for him to do that.
I'm with
this
you.
Game. We don't know how the Chargers feel about it, but they're going to give him this whole game. And I think they're probably telling him, go win, right? Take this team and go win, score a touchdown. Right. And I think the biggest thing for me outside of, because I think right now his spot is safe until they can find an alternative for him, because they're telling you right now that he's better than Luis Perez, who, would I like to see Luis Perez play more? Sure. But at the same time, outside of that first throw that he made, right? It's been pretty whatever since then, best of luck to him. But I don't, there's composure and stuff like that, but it just, obviously they're seeing something in practice where they're saying, okay, let's just see what Easton Stick has. This is an important game for us to evaluate him. And I'm just hoping that he can give guys chances to make plays, that he can help the rest of these guys put their best foot forward, which he has not been able to do in weeks 1 or 2 of the preseason, like a Simi Fehoko Or a Brenden Rice, can he get, a target that's catchable that he doesn't drop? Can Simi continue to be one of the Chargers' biggest playmakers? We're into that. Isaiah Spiller versus Jarrett Patterson. Donald Parham versus Stone Smartt. A lot of battles, a lot of things up for grabs going into this final preseason game. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. I do have to tell you guys, though, that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? Maybe you never skip leg day or therapy day. When your schedule is packed with kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I know I definitely make therapy one of my non-negotiables, and I think it's just so important to have someone else you can help unburden yourself of maybe stresses you have, and also just kind of irrational, even paranoid things you have about people being mad at you or not being able to see people enough, and all those things that I've definitely dealt with since having a kid. So all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch anytime for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. David, now it's time to get into all of the battles that are going down. I know we've talked about it a little bit this week, but there's some real kind of questions at the bottom of this roster where the Chargers could go a lot of different directions, because it is the first time. There's no precedent for how Joe Ortiz is going to build a team or how Jim Harbaugh will like to build this team, right? Every team's a little bit different. Jim Harbaugh's been out of the NFL for a while, so I don't know if you get much.
About 10 years.
A team, that was centered around like Alex Smith and had, the defense that they had. So I think it's going to be different than the last time he was here. And there's going to be some tough decisions. It has to start with the guys that everyone has been talking about this last week, because all of a sudden it does feel like Brenden Rice's roster spot is very much in jeopardy, because he's been outperformed by Simi Fehoko in the preseason. And you can kind of argue and, go back and forth about how much opportunity that Brenden Rice has had. But that's just the fact of the matter. Like, if we thought Brenden Rice would make this team, we told you pretty early on, hey, don't forget about Simi Fehoko in this race. And all he's done is had, 320-plus yard receptions on an offense that hasn't scored a touchdown and has sputtered their way through the first 2 games of the preseason. So this is definitely one of the battles we'll be watching most closely on Saturday night's game against the Cowboys.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, with Justin Herbert back in practice, Brenden Rice is starting to make plays in practice again. So it's like, okay, well, the preseason games are a part of the evaluation process, of course. Yep. Like, you want to see how they're able to perform out there. But you also have to keep in mind that Justin Herbert wasn't the one throwing those passes, okay? And he's probably getting a little bit more opportunity when you have an elite quarterback getting you the football. So you got to, take into account what they're doing in the offseason, in training camp, all of that, and take a look at the entire evaluation. For Brenden Rice, he's got to go out there and ball out. He's got to go out there and get open. He's going to have to make plays. He's going to have to block in the running game. He is going to have to do everything he can, because Simi Fehoko has done everything in his power to try to earn a roster spot. And he contributes on special teams. So that's another piece of the pie that you have to take into this equation. Simi Fehoko has made plays on offense, explosive plays. He's made great blocks in the running game. And, he's been able to produce on special teams. So he is affecting the game in as many ways as he possibly can. And this is the last chance for both of these guys to go out there and try to earn that roster spot. Go take it. Go be the guy that leaves no doubt that you should be the last receiver on this depth chart.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said before, it's hard to know how the game's going to play out. It's hard to know what opportunities that they're going to have. Just because one guy doesn't do great in this game doesn't mean he's not making the roster.
Absolutely.
But this is the last thing you're going to be able to put on tape before they cut the rosters down to 53 next Tuesday. So the clock is ticking. This is the best audition you're going to have, and it feels like these guys will get a lot of reps, especially the guys that they're unsure about at this point. And I do think, even though it seemed like Brenden Rice would make it, he is a 7th-round pick, and it's also important to remember that Simi Fehoko once upon a time was a 5th-round pick. Like, it's not like this dude has, didn't come into the league with some sort of expectations. Like, he was a 5th-round pick that, I'm sure the Cowboys thought would be good when they drafted him there. So I liked him coming out of college, too. I think, his senior year, he was on pace for like 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, like 75 catches before he got hurt. Nice. So he has, he was supposed to be a good player too. And I think when you're talking about that 6th roster spot, a guy who's probably not going to see the field much offensively unless there's injuries. what else can you get out of that position? But there's a lot more to do with that when it comes to the running backs too, and other positions that are expected to play on special teams as well. And we might have kind of a 3-person race going into this one between Isaiah Spiller, Jarrett Patterson versus Elijah Dotson. These guys, David, are probably all fighting it out for the 4th running back spot on this team if the Chargers decide to keep 4, which a team that runs this much with the injuries of the guys ahead of them that start probably would be a good idea. It does feel to me like Kimani Vidal has separated himself from this group. I mean, maybe we'll see him. I don't think we really need to. I kind of hope we do. I mean, he's fun to watch.
Yeah, I'd like to see him. Yeah.
Either way, though, these other 3 guys need the most carries and most kind of, attention in this last game. And I think that you're going to see a lot from them. And I think that Jarrett Patterson goes into this with a very big lead for these other guys to try to catch up to.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think Jarrett Patterson has been explosive with his touches. I think he's made the most of his opportunities so far. Also, taking into account where he's been at on the depth chart as far as, training camp is concerned in the off season. It seems like, after those other guys, he's been the first running back that's been on the field. So he definitely has a little bit of a lead here. But this is the last chance for these guys to showcase their hands, showcase good vision, good contact balance, not going down on first contact. Pass protection, got to make sure Easton Stick's able to make some throws, step into some throws, and playmaking. Ultimately, go out there and go make an explosive run. Go run somebody over. Go get a first down on a 3rd and short. Go out there and score a touchdown. Do everything you possibly can on the offensive side to either make yourself that last 4th running back on the roster or that first running back on the practice squad, which we know is still very important because this is a position of attrition. It is one of the most violent positions on the football field. You are constantly getting hit every single time you touch the football. So being that practice squad running back is not the end of the world, and there is a very strong chance that you could be seeing time playing, getting the football during the regular season if you do make the practice squad.
Yeah, and the reason I said Jarrett Patterson has the biggest lead going into this one is just basically because of the lack of production from, Elijah Dotson. 7 carries, 15 yards, 2.14 yards per carry. Isaiah Spiller's been worse than that, 7 carries for 12 yards, and only got 2 carries in preseason game number 2. So it's interesting. Spiller does have 5 catches for 34 yards, and 33 of that is after the catch, but it does feel like maybe the swan song for a former Chargers 4th round pick to me a little bit. Unless he can have a huge performance. But as we saw from Elijah Dotson last year, sometimes that's all it takes is one really big performance because he had that big game, 240-plus yard touchdowns, and then he ended up making the team. But another really important position, David, is at tight end, where I think there's a lot of ambiguity right now about how many they're going to keep and who they're going to keep. And to me, it still feels like Donald Parham versus Stone Smartt could be a thing where it felt like Stone Smartt was pulling away a little bit. All of a sudden, Donald Parham comes back from being hurt. Stone Smartt gets hurt. And now I think it's a lot closer. Luckily, Stone Smartt was at practice today on Thursday, meaning, I'm sure if they have questions about if he's going to make this team, he will be playing in this game. I would have to think, right? Give himself the best chance at it. And it's also for Donald Parham, who, just in that one Justin Herbert magical practice, I think had 3 touchdowns between team drills and one-on-one. So he's putting his best foot forward. Which one of these guys can put a stamp in this game? Because Donald Parham is, 1 catch for 8 yards during the preseason so far. And this one feels like it's open. Mainly because I think both these guys pretty much serve the same purpose. They're both receiving options that are poor at blocking. And how many of those same guys do you want on one team?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a good question. And also, I think their opportunity is that much bigger right now, specifically because the 2 tight ends that are above both these guys on the depth chart are currently injured or not practicing right now with Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. Yeah. So there is, an opportunity for one of these pass catching tight ends to come in and go out there and make sure that they're the guy. I think in that situation, because of how much of a danger he is in the red zone, I think Donald Parham probably has a slight edge in that particular role, but we'll see who goes out there and earns it.
Yeah, we'll see, right? They also signed 2 tight ends in the last week or so, right? Yeah. They signed Isaac Rex in the last week or so. They also signed Tucker Fisk before the last preseason game. Hard to say if those are just camp bodies because you're not going to play, Will Dissly or, Hayden Hurst, and maybe not even Stone Smartt if he can't get, fully back to being ready to play in a game. Hard to know, but doesn't look good for my guy, Zach Hines. That sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we didn't really get to see him much in the preseason at all. Luke Benson, the tight end that was running, low 4.4s. He's a guy that we'll see. I'm sure he's going to get some run in this one, but another guy that I don't know if he brings a ton to the table from the blocking perspective on a team that, really wants their tight ends to be able to block better. So how many of those one-dimensional guys are you going to keep after Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly, who are both banged up? And Hayden Hurst hasn't been practicing since the Easton Stick hospital ball. So hopefully he can get better soon. But there are more guys to get into, especially on the defensive side of things, where we have a really unique battle going on between JT Woods and Thomas Harper, who's trying to complete his Cinderella story after kind of coming out of nowhere to give himself a chance to make up the roster this year. Tremont Morris Brash, how much does he have going into this last game? And also talking about some guys we're going to be watching in the trenches to see if they can put their best foot forward and find a way to battle their way onto this roster. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong spot. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, and I think that is what sets them apart, is just the quality of the candidate, because if you have a job opening, the last thing you want to do is hire the wrong person and then be looking to fill that same job only a couple months later. It's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for their hiring, so post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. David, there's some more guys that have a lot at stake going into this last preseason game on Saturday afternoon against the Dallas Cowboys, including JT Woods, right? Which, in year 3 for a third-round pick, I don't think you like to be on the roster bubble as much as he seemingly is, but he has some new life playing cornerback. But how will the Chargers kind of attribute him staying on the roster as far as how they're building the roster? Will he count as a safety? Will he count as a cornerback? Will he be their 7th cornerback, right? And then Thomas Harper, another guy like Simi Fehoko, making big impact on defense, and then also having some special teams impact as well with a couple of tackles there. Can he find a way to shoehorn his way onto the team? We're going to get to that, but I do want to thank everyone for making us your first listen today. If you want a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast, so you don't end up with a ridiculous punishment that ends up going viral that you have to do, like the one I just saw today, where one guy who finished last in his league had to get to his draft party in Vegas a day early, and he only had $20 to survive the night. That is a terrible, terrible feeling. If you want to avoid that, I can assure you that you will if you follow the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from, so you can avoid all-time embarrassment. But let's get to this battle, David, the battle for safety 4/CB7. Kind of a weird battle going on between Thomas Harper and JT Woods. I think for JT Woods, he's kind of had a little bit of a rebirth, a reawakening somewhat, and playing at outside cornerback now. But we think that there's 6 cornerbacks that are already safe on this roster. So he would be number 7 behind the other reserves like Tareeb Still, Cam Hart, and obviously Dean Leonard, who had a huge game last week. Now we're looking at it though and saying, okay, but he does bring some versatility, right? But you don't really trust him at safety. So that's kind of what makes it interesting. It'll be really interesting to watch to see if AJ Finley plays in this game, right? Because I know we think he's safety number 3. If that's not, the 15th starter on defense, I'm not sure what would qualify as that. But you have 2 guys here, David, kind of fighting for different positions, the same position. Thomas Harper brings some versatility too, but I'm going to be watching both of these guys closely.
Very much so. Yeah, I think for JT Woods, like, the opportunity to play corner was kind of a new lease on life, a new opportunity for him to try to show his value, to become another chess piece for Jesse Minter to deploy, another coverage defender that he can fit into some particular schemes to be able to maybe give him some kind of an advantage, because we know that he has some real coverage ability. He has that ball hawking ability, and he's got real recovery speed. Like, this guy runs a legit 4.3. He is, a very athletic defender, a very long defender. Like, he is, a kind of a guy that where you feel like, if you can play multiple spots, you could find a role for him in your defense, a guy that can do a little bit of what you want on the back end. And then for Thomas Harper, he's a guy that I think he needs to continue to play fast and play physical. I like the way he's been, really coming up and tackling and trying to make an impact there and on special teams. I think you're going to have to make some headway there. You're going to have to make some plays there, because that's what, one of these last DBs on the roster is going to have to do, is to contribute on special teams in like a core 4 way.
Yeah, I mean, both of these guys will have to do something on special teams if they make the team. I mean, Thomas Harper kind of came out of nowhere. One of the safeties we didn't talk about. I talked about Akeem Dent and Jalen Phillips. Thomas Harper, with connections to Chris O'Leary, the Chargers safeties coach, has a chance, right, going into this one. He's played pretty well. I also hope we get to see Tony Jefferson out there, who seems to be back at practice. Hopefully he, after I think only getting like 5 snaps or something like that in the first game, hopefully he gets a run in this game too, if they're going to give him a chance for it. But we'll speed things up here, David, and go to the trenches really quick, because I think there's a few names that we should be keeping an eye on going into things. And I think this battle is going to have a lot to do, again, with how many, offensive linemen do the Chargers want to keep? How many defensive linemen do they want to keep? Because there's certain guys we feel like are safe, but maybe some spots out there some guys could be fighting for.
Yeah, I think, the first name that comes to mind is one of the newest signees in the room, Teair Tart. I think the Chargers probably like what they've seen from him. He definitely looked impactful in the, few snaps that he got after, just arriving a few days before. So definitely going to be interested to see if he plays and how well he plays. And then I think the other guys are, guys like Gerard Clark, who's in the middle of that defensive line. And then Chris Hinton, I think, is another guy, that has some Michigan connections, with Jim Harbaugh, and obviously being a player for him at one point in time. So I think those are a couple of guys I'm going to be paying very close attention to and see if they're going to be able to make some plays.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Teair Tart, just from watching him that first game that he played in, the second preseason game, it was pretty clear that he deserves to be on a roster, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where that is, we'll see. He already got released from one team this year already, but it does feel like he has not just kind of the ability to make the roster, but potentially even starting ability at the nose tackle spot right in the middle of Jesse Minter's defense. So I think that'll be too valuable to pass up if for any on the field reasons, because it definitely seems like on the field he has it all together, or did in the last game. And then I think you feel like Morgan Fox, Poona Ford, Scott Malak, Tito Aboni, and Justin Aboigbe are all safe. Feels like that, right? It'd be hard to imagine, but are you going to keep 6 defensive linemen if you're adding Teair Tart into that room? It's doable, but it has to come from somewhere else as well. Like we always talk about, where are you taking it from? On the other side of things, on the offensive line, Willis Patrick is a guy we talked about a couple days ago, has been phenomenal so far. Really hasn't allowed any pressure, has been a good run blocker so far. Already has put together a really good sample size of tape during this preseason to kind of prove that he should be making this team. And unfortunately, it's hard to know where it's going to come from. I mean, the starting 5's all safe. And then after that, you'd think Brenden Hymish, Jamari Sawyer, Jordan McFadden are all locks. That's only 8 offensive linemen, though. I think the problem is Willis Patrick doesn't play tackle. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, it's hard for me to believe Alex Leatherwood makes this team. I would be surprised.
Yeah, it's probably Foster Sorrell more than likely.
And it's probably going to be Foster Sorrell, which I have very mixed feelings about, to say the least. I mean, Patrick has played better than him, but if they think he has the versatility to play tackle, I mean, he's probably still the third option to tackle behind.
Yeah, I mean, maybe
Joe
McClellan too.
Pickens.
I mean, he might make a case.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. Both those guys have been kind of up and down, whereas Willis Patrick has been pretty much a
he's been solid. He's been nails for sure.
And then the last guy, David, a guy that Jesse Minter brought up specifically, Tremont Morris-Brash. And this one I think has a lot to do with, it felt like the Chargers were going to keep 5 edge rushers when they had Chris Rumpf, but now to me, Chris Rumpf having the foot injury that he does, and we don't think it's season ending or anything, but it's hard to know for sure he's going to make the team now after the glowing remarks Jesse Minter had about him. But does he still feel the same way about Tremont Morris-Brash? It was a lot to do with injury insurance for Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and all those guys. But now it's hard to say, because Chris Rumpf, one of the main reasons he was going to be able to make the team was because of his special teams performance, as well as, what Jesse Minter liked in the offseason. Now it's hard to know if Tremont Morris-Brash has a spot that he's actually fighting for.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the first preseason game, he was able to create some pressure. I think in the second preseason game, he wasn't really as active. I mean, he's generated 3 pressures and 2 tackles across 2 games. So I think for him to be able to make this roster, he's going to have to make a major statement in this football game. I think when you're looking at an edge room that has Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, Tuli Tuipulotu, and Bud Dupree. Like that's one of the best units in the league. I mean, it's really hard to get past that. So I think, given, Chris Rump's injury, Morris Rasher is going to have to come in here and really put on a show.
I think the good news for him, though, is he's maybe the undrafted free agent we have heard the most about throughout the entirety of training camp. I mean, there's other guys who are potentially close, but he feels like the undrafted free agent, one of the ones that has the absolute best shot to make this team. And it's going to be really hard for any of those guys. But it does feel like he would be that dude, especially with how the coaches have talked about him and what he was able to do in its entirety throughout training camp and also in the preseason game. So it does feel like he still has to have a big game, but a lot of it, I think, is going to come down to roster construction. And if you can afford to keep an extra edge rusher on the roster, especially if Joey Bosa is going to be coming back week 1 or you expect that. So much fun on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Make sure you don't get tricked by that. I mean, me and David both were like 1 p.m. I mean, Saturdays, that's not times that we're usually
weird time.
Yeah, but if you guys make sure you guys check out the postcast that's going to come out on Apple Podcasts. It's something different that we have going on there. It's not us that's on there, but you absolutely have to check it out because it's going to be coming out right after the game. A little alternative to maybe some radio stations and things like that. Somewhere who's going to be talking about exactly what happened in that game. So make sure you guys check out the Locked On Chargers postcast show. But also, we will be back with you guys on Sunday night. Probably, maybe live show probably will come out on Sunday morning, getting into a recap of this game. And then Monday night, we will have a live show getting into our final 53-man roster predictions. So much fun. To make sure you don't miss any of it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as following us on all of our social media where we post the show to every day at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can also find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on Twitter at DroTalkSD. But super excited to see who stands out and who can make their mark in this last preseason game against the Cowboys. Maybe go win, go score a touchdown, do something for me in this one. And we'll be back with you guys on Monday to break it all down. But until then, you guys take it easy and go Bulls.